Okay, let us start.
Want to come? You want to talk power? We talk power. Ah, we're actually starting a presentation. I can take out.
So, thank you everyone that joined online for this webinar and at the same time seminar here at House of our IEEE Task Force. So, it is a pleasure today to host Dr. Salam Baniahmed from Baniahmed Energy. Salam did his PhD in the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, 2017. And he has been since with Eton Research Labs and recently with Veloci. He has extensive experience in cyber physical layers of smart grid and critical grid infrastructures. He has done a lot of work towards resiliency, measurements, and metrics. And now at Veloci, he leads the technical development of power systems controls for cloud connected energy applications with a specific focus on energy storage. So without further ado, Salam, the floor is yours. And thank you for coming to the house.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for having me. I enjoyed the day, although I have a very bad jet lag. So I appreciate your patience with me. Sometimes I fade away, so hopefully I'll come back. All right. So thanks for being here. Thanks for joining, and thanks for inviting me, Harris. I appreciate giving me a chance to talk about this. The topic is not necessarily new to me. I've been talking about this for the past 5 years, and people are starting to catch on it. Hopefully, uh, a little bit better than I was hoping uh, for 2022, 2023. And basically, the topic is all about the resiliency aspects of power systems against cyber incidents, or as I put it here, against synthetic cyber disasters. And I put it this way for a very good reason. Recently, I've been seeing a lot of talks and conversations from OT folks who are focusing on the operational side of power systems, and IT folks who are trying to, focus on the security aspect of power systems. And to be honest, most of the times I don't really like that conversation. It becomes some kind of a challenge. That's your role, that's my role. This is something that should happen. No, this is not something to touch. And we're not really focusing on the ultimate goal for us, which is basically the continuous operation of a power system, regardless, and whatever cyber measures are we adding to that. At the same time, we're actually trying to what do we call to do some kind of the grid modernization, and it's going really slow because there has been some kind of a pushback to modernize the grid. Adding all these connectivity features, making it a little bit more intelligent, because we're afraid of a security breach that could happen at any time, regardless if it's at an enterprise level or an OT level. So in general, I call it a disaster because until now, it's not cybersecurity is considered a normal thing, something that's eating up the budget for power systems applications. And they're focusing on the resiliency whenever there's a natural disaster, like a volcano or a fire or whatever that is. But cybersecurity or a cyber breach or an incident is still a disaster, especially that when there is some kind of a bad implications that could happen. We're going to talk briefly about that when we talk about the minor attack and some of the potential impacts that could impact our power systems, and it could go beyond that where it impacts lives. So things to I like always to start with cybersecurity is not only a solution. They always call it a solution, and that's why OT folks don't like to talk to IT folks because they're pushing for a solution, but it's not only a solution; it's also a problem. Because right now, once you have all of these cybersecurity uh, measures added on top of your power system, now you need to maintain it. It's not like a simple thing that you deploy and just leave it and go. You have to maintain it. You have to keep investing in it. Um, some may say the cybersecurity market is by 2025 is projected to be $270 billion, which is a lot. And I'm not sure what's the share for power systems from that, but I would anticipate that it's going to be a good 40% share. The necessity of an OT security existence is not hackers. We do not secure OT because of hackers. It's basically because of the lack of resilience. Because we always try to consider adding these cybersecurity layers to our OT systems, but we do not consider any potential breach that could happen, any potential attack. And we always try to understand, oh, what could be the impact? Let's do threat modeling and everything. But we always forget to augment that with engineering design approaches, meaning that, the hope from now on, whenever we design a new system, we need to think about how we can embed resiliency within our system without adding much complications to it, which is doable. And hence the talk today. I want to focus on or talk a little bit about the modularity of power systems and see it showing, oh, okay, it's doable. It needs a lot of work, but it's doable. And research is the path to go, of course, and it's not only an industry problem, it's research institutions problem that could potentially, channel into the industry and making it like something that we can use on a daily basis. As I mentioned before, the minor attack, I'm not gonna read through this, don't worry. I don't have much time, so I'm trying to keep it short today. But I want to focus this, if you're not aware of the minor attack, it's basically a platform where you can visualize and read about all these information that relates to mobile internet and ICS. So I like to go there like once in a while, just to take a look at if there's anything new. But this is one thing that I really like to use sometimes, especially for introducing the issue of a cybersecurity breach into power system. And every single time, this is what catches my eye. The concern of loss of safety. Basically, if there is some kind of a breach and, any of these issues that come up, the loss of safety is basically where a de-energized system could be energized due to that attack or because of the adversary, especially that if the adversary is not part of the what's called the advanced persistent threat, they don't know exactly what they're doing. They're just trying to open breakers, close breakers, things like that. And anything that should be de-energized and people are working on that line, their life is in jeopardy. So it's not about costing the company or utility any financial losses. It's not about damaging equipment anymore. When lives are at stake, this is where we have to draw a line and rethink our strategy when it comes to why are we trying to secure our power systems applications and how are we trying to do that by minimizing the impact of any potential attack. I've had many conversations with people saying that, oh no, we're not a target. And believe me, I've seen many talks, especially from government agencies. The first thing they start with is basically talking to utility. Doesn't matter how big or how small you are as a utility owner or an asset owner, you're always a target, especially that you have this physical connection with your neighboring systems. If there's any ripple, any disruption that happens there, it might migrate or cascade to your system. So it's nice to have some kind of a collaborative work where we need to make sure that this doesn't happen. Loss of protection, same thing, but this touches on the protection side. And anything that could be damaging not only to the equipment that's owned by the utility, but the loads themselves. Same thing happens to damage of property, denial of control, all these examples that could really be an issue. And some of the historical, when I say historical, most recent attacks and attempts, they were actually falling into one of these categories. You might not hear about a lot of attempts. I tried to, gather some information before, but there are many attempts that you could ever imagine on utility scale systems. Uh, they, I wouldn't say fail, but at least, from what I heard, they were captured at early stages. They tried to, contain that within the internet side before it gets into the system. Last year, there was a big blow up, a substation somewhere, and it's been, no, actually, it was a couple of years ago. It started with a denial of service on their website. A couple of days later, a substation blew up. Nobody knows why. Nobody understood why. Maybe they did, but it's like it should be treated as a secret information until somebody gives a thumbs up that you could share. But it's been a couple of years, and I asked around, and until now, nobody shared any information. So what I'm saying is, it's not only a matter of internet connected power system application, and you could feel that there's some kind of an air gap in between all of these subsystems, but they're related to some extent. Sometimes distraction could happen at the internet side, so you can do damage at the OT side. It's doable. Thinking about all these possibilities when it comes to, oh, what's the possibility for these guys to get into my system so it can add more defense mechanisms? That's not a waste of time. I wouldn't call it that, but focusing on that is a waste of time. And that's why we need to find a way to create resiliency at the power system side. This is one of my favorite slides. Basically talks about design principles. What do we need to do in order to think about to change our train of thoughts when it comes to creating resilient systems? The first thing we do is establishing the context. Why do we do that? It's a power system application. It's not a normal IT related application. Yes, we have communications, we use TCP/IP, whatever we have, but basically knowing the context of the system is the first step towards creating a resilient system. How we can do that? Basically by making compromise difficult. Looking into the system, knowing, understanding every single aspect of it. Basically, we can look into each part of it, modularize it, chop it down into small pieces, and each piece could be dealt with as a subsystem. With that, we can think about a new way how we can make this system a little bit more resilient. Then we can sum it up by adding all of these pieces together, making disruption difficult. This is part of security side, but at the same time, it's basically helping the system when we segment it, and we're going to be talking about segmentation. When we segment it, where we can stop and contain things from this cyber side, from the cyber aspect of the system. We can compromise detection easier. Understanding your system, you can create a baseline profile. You have something to compare it with. And if something doesn't belong there, maybe this is, I don't want to say a big alarm, it's basically a signal that something is not right, and maybe you need to have an early management or impact mitigation, not necessarily to shut down the system, but something that could be helpful down the line. I've done before when I was at Eaton, I've worked for 2 years on a project that's relevant to this, basically looking into detection systems. But the difference was we're not only looking into IT signatures that's coming from an IT related or IT based intrusion detection system. We're also looking into the power data, comparing that to some kind of a baseline, and getting all of that into a decision tree. And the result is basically some kind of hey, you have an issue, there's a problem, and it's most likely into this device with certain degree of confidence. So it tells me, okay, 70% it's there. So before you take any action, make sure that it's there or find a way. But at least information that's can be coming out of this would be really helpful. Of course, the last step would be reducing the impact. And how can I do that? You can see it's related to all of these steps, but reducing the impact is basically creating this kind of capability where I can actually create some kind of a command and control for my system to be able to contain, prevent any potential cascaded damage, even if I have to give up, some good portion of my system. At least I protected certain level of my system where I can say, oh, okay, I did not shut down entirely. This is where I was really happy when the cyber informed engineering document came out sometime last year. It came out from, DOE, and they were focusing on changing the perspective of how do we, pursue some kind of engineering mechanism to create resilient systems. And I'm quoting here where they say, planned resilience with no assumed security. The way to create resilience for your system, just put it in the danger zone. Assume that you have no security measures and somebody's trying to manipulate your system. How can you prevent that? This is how you build the mentality to start thinking how to protect the system from potential harm, how to protect people from potential harm. And this way, basically, they're looking into the design stage and it becomes the implementation. And you can see this is where your IT system basically secured, has all of these locks, then you put it inside. Basically, this is still, a system in jeopardy. If this breaks, this can be manipulated easily. But what they're trying to do, they're trying to consider security and resilience from the design phase, so it doesn't matter where you put it. At least you have certain level of relief that something could be helpful when something bad happens or when chaos happens. Thinking of cyber physical systems or power systems, all of these communicating points. You can see, power grid layer or the physical layer, and you have the communication layer. Of course, this is a very, very abstract diagram. There are many layers. If you know Purdue model, basically has from L0 to L5, and now the cloud comes into play. It complicates things for everyone. Data coming in, data coming out, and all these firewalls in the middle. But at least the abstract way, you can say, okay, the cyber layer or communication layer is sitting up here, and you have data exchange. But mostly, and recently, we're trying to focus on data direction, sending command and control. But the command and control is focusing on what? Focusing on economical dispatch, a way to save money by dispatching all these DERs that's sitting here, making sure that the consumption is down and saving money and everything, which is a very good thing. But we could use this as well. I'm going to be talking about it later. We can use this to leverage this to add the resiliency aspect to it. So we cannot just say, okay, we're creating all these complicated, interfacing points between all of these smart grid features, and we're forgetting that we can add some other protocols or some kind of points where we can say, okay, there's some kind of command and control between the cyber layer, the physical layer, not necessarily initiated by the cyber layer, could be initiated by the devices sitting in the field because they could see the attack first. And many attacks that actually took place recently, or many attempts that took place recently on the power grid, it was initiated from the OT side. So all of these firewall that's sitting in the IT side, they did not even see it. They received a call, oh, we're facing a problem. I got this from someone who works in a big utility. They said, we were the last people to hear about these things. So initiating from the OT side, we need to be able to create some kind of command and control that propagates all the way up to the cloud and making sure that we have systemic incident response management. How should we do that? I don't know. Smart people like you could help me. And one of the documents that I really like, basically the NIST 800 160, I think, version 2, which is where I got this. I I apologize. Basically, it talks about the goals. Why do we need to create or to design resilient systems, focusing on all of these points that I just mentioned before. And at the same time, it looks at it and separates it into, what needs to be done, what are my goals in terms of, anticipation and withstanding a cyber incident, being able to recover and adapt to the new normal. Maybe it could be this adaptation could be like a couple of minutes, could be a couple of years. I'm afraid about cyber incidents that took 3 years to fully recover. So adaptation is really necessary at some point. Even the adaptation, if we had to resort to adaptation, it has to be a quick adaptation because we need to understand this is our new normal. It's like what happened to us, to everyone in COVID, basically. We thought it's going to be a couple of months thing and it ended up a couple of years. So defining objectives, all these are basically identified in details in the document. But what I like is the how to do this, focusing on all of these design principles, the one that I mentioned before, and adding to that things like adaptive response, creating some kind of a modeling for the system that could generate some kind of a twin model for planning purposes, so you don't have to touch on the critical system that's running 24/7. And of course, it talks about structural design principles that focuses on the overall connectivity from the bottom to the top. All these approaches techniques. But keep in mind that they don't tell you what are these techniques, what are these approaches. It talks about very generic information, and I'm hoping to see more research focusing on approaches and techniques to achieve these results. Most of the times, I'm really tied down as an industry guy. I'm a little bit swamped here and there, so I cannot focus on it specifically. But at least in the near future, I wish I could at least have see people on board and be part of their research efforts, focus on creating these techniques and approaches, even for simple use cases. Could be a very great starting point. One technique that I actually wanted to mention because it relates to the modularity of power systems is the segmentation part. This is the core of what I wanted, the delivery the deliverable from this talk. Basically, talking about segmentation, it's not a new thing. It's been a while it's been there for a while, for a long time, especially for the IT systems. Basically, the definition for it is locating points where I can say, okay, I can segment my system here, 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 and defining critical zones for my IT system and trustworthiness level. Meaning that if I have like my IT cabinet is a whole different segment than a meeting room because people come and go to a meeting room, but the IT cabinet nobody is there, so I have to limit the physical access to it. Same thing happens for power systems, specifically for substations. Substations you see most of the times you see it barricaded and has this physical security on it, but at the same time. It may have inside, it has the control room, which has all these devices that collects information, collects data. So this segmentation is already happening, and you can see it at the Purdue model we have. What do we need to focus on? I'm hoping to see more research. Is basically segmented horizontally, and this is what's missing because right now we're looking into power system application, and we deal with everything that's on the ground as a physical system. And we start, with a grid modularization, we try to create all of these connectivity to the cloud, to, all these control centers, defining protocols, whatever we can do there. But with time, it becomes a chaotic model. it's a chaotic system because everybody is trying to connect here, 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 there, and especially that the OT folks, they're trying to make it happen. And making it happen is not entirely secure because I understand that the operation guys or the substation engineers, all these power engineers, their ultimate goal is to make sure that their system works or not. This is their goal. IT, they want to make sure that the system is secure. And if IT keeps pushing for those security measures, it's going to be really hard for them to do their job because they have to get permission for every single thing they need. Funny story, I always try to tell, whenever I was talking to one of the OT engineers and I told him, how can I help? I was trying to get some kind of voice of customer. And literally, he said, if you want to help me, call Chris from IT and ask him to get off my back. I could never forget this. He couldn't think about anything else because his hurdle is basically security. And that's why, at the beginning, cybersecurity is becoming a problem because some people are forgetting why we're doing this, especially, listening to all these conversations that show some kind of separation. While, adversaries, they have all the time. We have the ego to say, oh, we're good now. So in a way, what I want from this is to show some kind of segmentation that's already there, modularity that's already there. It's an old practice to do zoning for power systems. So in a way, that could be considered like horizontal segmentation. But at the same time, we don't have like a fully segmented system because all of these components, they always talk vertically. They talk to a higher control level. In order to create some kind of an intelligent edge, to be able to respond and leverage the modularity of that, we need to be able to make all of these components at the edge talk to each other. So having peer communication level, this will complicate things, but it will solve problems. And if it's being done in the right way, I think we should be able to achieve that without complicating our lives, especially when it comes to adding more cyber assets to the power system. I'm not saying that I'm against adding more cyber assets, but basically what I would always like to see is being a little bit cautious when we add cyber assets. Adding components that adds more communications. It may be an overkill to the edge, especially if we say, oh, you know what, I'm adding a device that's intelligent and responsible for processing all the data and coming up with decisions. Yes, that works, but we could actually embed things together. So there's a solution and there's a trend to move to containerized hardware where we can deploy all of these components on the same hardware. We just need to retrofit what we have right now that's sitting in the field, or at least utilize the hardware that's sitting there. For that, I don't want to divert here. Basically, what we need to do is create this peer-to-peer communications to create what's called the general awareness. General awareness that happens at this level, where the rest of the levels they don't even care about. And so this way we can create our own command and control at the edge. And most of the times we can create intelligent, decision making here. So this level will be able to tell this level what happened, just the reporting side. And with that, we can, especially for, let's say attacks or incidents, I don't want to say attacks, incidents that could happen at the edge. This way we could actually make decisions here without human intervention. And we could buy these 2 seconds where the actual damage could take place instead of waiting for a couple of phone calls and following some kind of a playbook of what needs to be done whenever I see something like this. So this is what one thing is to create some kind of a segmentation, horizontal segmentation at the edge. This is one thing. It's already there. It just needs to be a little bit more meaningful. that command and control between them. The second thing is not forgetting what the DER role is. Right now, everybody's all about integrating and, doing some kind of a DER penetration at the edge, which is basically taking the power of generation from the legacy systems and giving it to the edge, supporting let's say, the stability of the electrical system at the edge. But at the same time, we can leverage all of these deployments, looking at the sizes of power or the amount of power or energy that's being stored there could be supported by them to take over if I don't trust it, the sourcing, which is most of the time is the case, especially that, utilities for any cyber incidents or any suspicion of an incident, uh, sometimes they tend to shut down the system. And if you lose that connectivity, your critical assets should remain going. And your DERs and energy storage, because DERs you cannot rely on day and night and everything, but energy storage is something that you always have, and it could be utilized for that purpose. Especially that the energy storage prices, it's not the same like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It drastically went down, and people are trending towards deploying these more. So what I see like as an urgent need from a research perspective, especially for people who already have models for all these complicated systems, start thinking about the zoning segmentation, the horizontal segmentation, and create some kind of a meaningful segmentation, and basically start thinking about when I try to segment my system, it has to be considered as a cyber physical segmentation, looking at points or mapping from my power system side, where do my protection devices sit? So I can say, okay, this is my zone, this is a physical zone, this is a physical zone, but at the same time, I need to map it to an isolation point from the cyber side. We don't have enough command and control to the cyber assets. Everything has to happen manually right now, especially with the zero trust principle that's being implemented right now. Uh, Basically, once I don't trust you, I don't even listen to you. So it doesn't even happen this way. So creating some kind of alternative communication paths that's only used as during chaos, that would be really, really important to investigate. I'm not saying that it's a very good idea. I've heard about it before. I liked it, but I thought it could be impacting the complexity of the system, which is not in a good way sometimes. So these are, a couple of thoughts that I always have in mind. And basically, what I always look at, all of these components in its current version, it's complex enough. And this is just an illustration. So you can imagine how complex it would be having millions of these, especially when we're talking about generation, including DERs at the edge. It's really, really, so this is not my figure. I think it's NIST Smart Grid Framework 4.0. I can check for you. I forgot this. Told you the jet lag, so I apologize. But you can find this. You can read about it. And you can read about the IEEE 2030 2011. That's actually I recently joined the working group to generate the new version of it. So basically, these are the things that we're looking at. All of these interfacing connectivity between all of these new components, not only considering the market side, economic dispatch, and all of these, money savings aspect to it, but also thinking about how we can think from the resiliency aspect and what could be needed in order to deploy or create some level of resiliency where we can say, oh, you know what, open ADR, we can dispatch energy storage to support at certain levels. If we can do that, I think we should be able to add some kind of an interface to say, okay, we can, command energy storage, we can command inverters, all of these devices that's sitting in the on the field, we can command them in time of chaos, and they will know that there is some kind of a chaos going out there and acting according to that. Thank you for listening. I'd love to have more conversations. This is my information. Please reach out. If you have any ideas, if you want to just talk, if you want to, collaborate, I'm always open to have conversations. Thank you very much. And I'm gonna leave some time for questions.
Thank you. Questions? Any questions here or online? So there was this, let me ask you something first. There was this bill 3 years ago in US from the White House about supporting research and implementation using analog communications. Being in industry in the US, did you see any move towards that approach, right? Using analog communication or like communication instead of internet supported physical applications like MP3 and Modbus? Or
Not from where I sat, to be honest. I wouldn't be surprised, to see some efforts leveraging all these available technologies. But there's always a concern of connectivity. I know dealing with some customers before, when they hear Wi-Fi, they freak out. Just Wi-Fi, adding, like creating components or saying that, oh, I have a component. No. Wi-Fi is disabled. Recently, I didn't hear that trend. Actually, any connectivity to the internet, that's a big no-no to them. But that's a good point. I need to look into it. Myself. I haven't seen that.
any other question? Line up here.
So I have one question. We are talking about improving resilience of our system. So resilience can have both a spatial and a temporal characteristic and definition. So improving the resilience on the, at least on the temporal side, we need to have different approaches in order to mitigate a cyber attack on any other defense. And also on the spatial one, you were talking about segmenting it. So why don't our systems also apply the face secure methodology that is being used, for example, space station? They define like the critical path of the system and they make sure that it works securely and it can also fail securely if need be. So what is your stand and what have you seen being done?
Well, I've seen things happening at the device level, not at the system level. So basically, what you're saying is valid and it's being deployed somewhere, but not for the system level. What I've seen is basically if you have let's say a device that has its own internal communication, they apply this fail-safe mechanism for the device. But still, if something happens outside of that box, it's not aware of it. And that's exactly where the special side comes in. If this device is within a system, it should be aware if there's some kind of chaotic issue that's happening around it and contribute to the solution where, okay, this is the action that should be taken. And this is my role based on that. It's not entirely included. And I've seen a couple of use cases that it's not really published. That people were talking about something like that, but not for a system level approach. And actually, this is exactly what be honest, I tried to do research on that, but I got blocked because there are other priorities. This is one of the perks of being.
And so there is also a question online about most power systems and utilities are designed to bring their security assessment based on single contingency or other. Do you think we can have a similar approach in the resilience side of power?
Well, it depends. If we're trying to apply, let me put it this way. I'm against applying any IT design approach towards IT blindly. So I think resiliency is not about it's not about applying what's been done for IT. It's basically looking into what do we have in constant context of power system, and it's something that should come from power systems folks, not necessarily from IT. Should be part of it, but creating resiliency it's a power systems thing, and OT guys should be able to deliver that. So it depends on the perspective and what they do as system owners and everything. But it's going to be a really, really tough job to do that, applying that directly to the OT side. That's my humble opinion.
There are two more questions online, if you don't mind. One is you mentioned about horizontal segmentation from Hans Pina. And you mentioned that DL could replace legacy generation that cannot be trusted. So the question is, how do you define trust? Is there any quantitative way to define trust?
Oh, that's a very good question. So, well, when I say couldn't be trusted, this is a way that's, let me give you the state of the art. I've been told that this is how the edge knows not to trust the enterprise IT. It's a phone call. So if there's a way that we translate or move away from a phone call into a signal that's received by the edge that, hey, don't trust anything that's coming from IT, and I might disconnect from you, or the generation unit is down, at least creating an alternative, let's say generation unit, or let's say distributed generation units at the edge could be the solution. But quantifying that, I don't know, might require some research. Happy to join any research effort that could quantify that. But right now, it's basically a simple phone call. Hey, we're down. That's it.
Okay, and last question, just from the audience line, how Sana, how adversaries traverse through the cyber layer and create outages and conditions?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this is actually falls under the definition of the advanced ecosystem threat. This is a theory. I think it came from Lockheed Martin and other companies who've been doing work on trying to understand the mentality of an adversary, trying to trace what they could do and trying to reverse everything that they would do. So the way they traverse it could be anything that's TCP/IP based. It could be an issue. Although we have all these security measures for Ethernet-based communications, it's not entirely secure. When we think that it could be an unauthenticated access, it's basically authenticated. And the inside threats are, I think it's number 3 on the list of concerns for power system application, inside of the threat. So it's an authenticated person who's sitting there and trying to manipulate things. And that's why, when I mentioned when I call it the synthetic cyber disasters, synthetic means it's man-made, and basically someone who's sitting there just typing on the keyboard, creating all these issues. It's someone who knows how to create these issues, not someone who's just trying to understand what's out there. But the definition of the advanced persistent threat, basically, even if I'm not someone who's aware of all these components and how can I traverse through all these components, I could penetrate the system and not doing nothing, and I wouldn't be caught. And I will take my time trying to understand, what devices am I talking to, and when it's time to hit, which is the actual attack, it's basically I will have a whole blueprint of the system and the way I can create the worst possible damage or disruption to the application. Hopefully that satisfies.
Any other questions from the room? Okay, if not, thanks, Salam. the video, the recorded talk in the website. Thank you. Bye bye.